I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, January 16th. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that a last-minute crisis with Hamas is holding up Israeli approval for a long-awaited agreement to pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip. And a spokesperson from his office confirmed this morning that Hamas has gone back on core aspects of the deal.
As of this morning, the Prime Minister's office has made clear that Hamas have reneged on this hostage release agreement and has created a last-minute crisis in an effort to extort last-minute concessions. As such, the Israeli cabinet cannot meet to agree this deal. It cannot convene until the mediators notify Israel that Hamas has accepted all elements of the agreement that were already agreed. Families of our hostages have been informed today that Hamas has added further demands that contradict the agreement with the mediators. As of this time, the details of the agreement have not yet been finalized, and the negotiation team is continuing its efforts to reach a solution. The Israeli negotiating team are still in Doha as befits Israel's willingness to finalize the hostage release agreement. Therefore, no official announcement will be made by Israel about the success of these negotiations and the subsequent cabinet meeting until we do not have a finalized agreement.
And while the details of what Hamas has gone back on aren't clear, the spokesperson for Prime Minister Netanyahu did confirm that one of the core issues is who controls the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border region of Gaza with Egypt. After the ceasefire agreement was announced, both the incoming and outgoing presidents took full credit. U.S. President Joe Biden praised the deal and outlined the phases in the agreement.
Because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. For more than 15 months of conflict, more than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people, more than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home.
When Mr. Biden had finished announcing what he called his signature foreign policy achievement, a blunt question was asked by a reporter, asking who deserves credit for the announcement.
Who does the history books credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you. Thanks, sir.
And in a press briefing today, a spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that Mr. Trump played a large role in the ceasefire.
Now, we're asked often why this agreement has come to a head now. I'll tell you. This moment has been chosen because of Israel's military and diplomatic strength. Hamas is on the ropes, and international pressure, including President Trump's decisive stance, together with the Biden administration, have created the conditions for this agreement.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is welcoming news of the potential ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip, calling it a light at the end of the tunnel. Mr. Trudeau says there's hope in Canada that community relationships deeply damaged by the 15-month-long conflict will be rebuilt. Hate crimes targeting Jews and Muslims have risen across Canada since the war started, as have large protests and encampments. Pro-Palestinian groups in Canada say that the new ceasefire deal to pause the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza will not end their regular demonstrations in cities like Toronto. The Palestinian Youth Movement and the Jews Say No to Genocide Coalition says that while a potential ceasefire in the 15-month war is welcome news, they still want to pressure the Canadian government to impose a 2-way arms embargo, among other things. Many of these protests over the last 15 months have called into question the limits on both free speech and lawful assembly, with several arrests being made for allegations of supporting terrorist organizations banned in Canada. All right, stay with us. Up next, U.S. President Joe Biden delivers his farewell address to the nation. And Justin Trudeau announces that he won't run for re-election in his Montreal riding. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. President Joe Biden has used his farewell address to the nation to warn of an oligarchy of the ultra-wealthy taking root in the country.
I have no doubt that America is in a position to continue to succeed. That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before, more than a century ago. But the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again.
Speaking on Wednesday from the Oval Office, as he prepares to hand over power to President-elect Donald Trump, Mr. Biden sounded alarm over the accumulation of power and wealth among a small few. Mr. Biden also called for a constitutional amendment to end immunity for sitting presidents after the Supreme Court granted Mr. Trump sweeping protections last year from criminal liability over his role in trying to undermine his 2020 defeat to Mr. Biden. Justin Trudeau and Canada's premier say that all options are on the table to respond to U.S. tariffs, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford continues to hold strong that Canada is not for sale.
We're the greatest country in the world. We're an economic powerhouse. There's nothing that we cannot build collectively across our great country. So I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank the people of Canada for standing with us, and we will never, ever give up. We're Canadians, we're proud Canadians, and Canada is not for sale.
After meeting with the premiers in Ottawa Wednesday to discuss Canada's tariff strategy, Mr. Trudeau emerged to say that the country's leaders are open to using any and all tools necessary to stand up for Canadians.
First of all, as we said, everything is on the table, and I support the principle of a proportional dollar-for-dollar response. That is not the question. The question that we ask ourselves, first and foremost, is if the new administration chooses to bring in tariffs, what is it that we can do that will result in the lifting of those tariffs as quickly as possible? That is first and foremost. And what we're doing right now, what we have been doing for weeks, is engaging with the American administration to highlight the investments we're making in our shared border, to respond to concerns that they've expressed. We've laid out a number of different things that matter to them. We know that the last thing the new administration wants to do is raise prices on American consumers for all sorts of goods. But that will be the consequence of these tariffs if they come in. So we are both trying to prevent them from coming in, and if they do come in, we will try to get them lifted as quickly as possible. And like I said, we will use any and all tools necessary as a country to stand up for Canadians.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who attended virtually and did not take part in the press conference, said in an online post that Alberta won't be able to support Ottawa's plan unless restrictions on energy exports to the U.S. are off the table. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau won't run for re-election in his Montreal riding.
In terms of my own decisions, I will not be running in the upcoming election. As to what I might be doing later, I honestly haven't had much time to think about that at all. I am entirely focused on doing the job that Canadians elected me to do in an extraordinarily pivotal time right now. The U.S. inauguration and the weeks that follow are something that is of deep, deep importance to Canadians, and we are entirely focused on that as a team.
The news comes just over a week after Mr. Trudeau announced that he will be stepping down as Liberal leader once the party selects his replacement. Mr. Trudeau was first elected in 2008 for the Montreal riding of Papineau and a narrow victory over the Bloc Québécois. The Liberals will choose a new leader to replace Mr. Trudeau after a national leadership race on March 9th. All right, stay tuned. Up next, a source close to Chrystia Freeland says that she is in favor of repealing the carbon tax. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. A man who claims to be a political outsider made a direct jump inside federal politics today. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has formally entered the federal Liberal leadership race to replace outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Mr. Carney unveiled his campaign this afternoon in Edmonton, ending nearly a decade of speculation about his political ambitions. The opposition Conservatives will attempt to tie Mr. Carney to the Trudeau government's sinking brand and his recent work advising the Liberal Party on economics. And according to CTV, the other person widely considered to be competing alongside Mr. Carney in the Liberal leadership race, Chrystia Freeland, is in favor of repealing the carbon tax. A source close to the former finance minister says that scrapping the carbon tax will be one of her policy planks in the Liberal leadership race. That same source claimed that Ms. Freeland would replace the carbon tax with a new system in cooperation with the provinces. On numerous occasions, Ms. Freeland has defended the tax when she was a member of Justin Trudeau's cabinet. One by one, President-elect Donald Trump's hoped-for cabinet is falling into place. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was back on track after a fiery Senate confirmation hearing that probed his drinking, allegations of sexual assault, and qualifications to lead the U.S. military. And Mr. Trump's other nominees pushed through a gauntlet of confirmation hearings on Wednesday. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming predicted that the Senate will start voting on January 20th to confirm some of Mr. Trump's picks. But Mr. Trump's more controversial choices of Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have yet to come before senators and face more uncertainty ahead. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Ukraine early Thursday to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky with help to guarantee the country's security for a century. The meeting comes just days before Donald Trump is to be sworn in as U.S. president after months of Mr. Trump promising to end the war. The UK government says Mr. Starmer and Mr. Zelensky will sign a 100-year partnership treaty in Kyiv. The deal would cover areas such as defense, science, energy, and trade. A new report suggests that Canada's healthcare system has fallen behind international peers, outperforming only the United States. Nonprofit think tank C.D. Howe Institute rates Canada 9th out of 10 countries evaluated, including top performers the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. The analysis says Canada's quality of care is relatively high, but accessing that care is a challenge. Newfoundland and Labrador and Nunavut had the weakest results, while Prince Edward Island, Quebec, and Ontario performed the best. Ting-Ting Zhang from the C.D. Howe Institute joined us to explain Canada's poor ranking.
Poor performance of Canada's health care system is mainly driven by its significantly below the international average of access to care category. And Canada also performed poorly for equity and its healthcare outcomes in general. Access to care is a persistent challenge for almost every provinces and territory in Canada. While it includes affordability, it also includes timely access to care, and both show very poorly results. So for those who can't access to care, we actually have a relatively high quality of care. The care process category shows that many provinces excel in preventative care, safe care, and virtual care for some jurisdictions as well. So But so again, access to care is the issue. If you cannot access to that care, even the quality is good, then it doesn't help for those who do not have access to that care.
Health Canada says that a synthetic dye that the U.S. is banning from its food supply in 2 years does not pose a health risk to the general population in Canada. The federal agency says that it won't echo a ban by U.S. Food and Drug Administration unless new information comes to light about the additive known as Red 3. Health Canada reviewed a safety evaluation by a joint committee for the UN and the World Health Organization in 2018 that looked at human and animal studies. The FDA is banning the dye from food and drugs after 2 studies found it caused cancer in lab rats with a rat-specific hormonal mechanism that does not exist in humans. All right, don't go anywhere. Coming up, a new report states that half of Canadians are less than $200 away from being unable to pay their bills. LA officials begin discussions about rebuilding after the Southern California wildfires. And Blue Origin launches its new rocket on its first test flight. We'll have these stories and more news when we return. Stay tuned. According to a new survey from TD Bank, almost half of Canadians say that inflation and the cost of living will continue to be the biggest financial challenge they face this year. The survey also finds many respondents, particularly younger Canadians, plan to cut down on their spending. Inflation has fallen back to around the Bank of Canada's 2% target, but the cost of living is still straining household budgets. Despite the ongoing concerns about the cost of living, the survey says that financial optimism has improved, with 24% saying they feel more confident about their finances in 2025. Emily Ross, TD's Vice President of Everyday Advice Journey, says that 5 consecutive Bank of Canada interest rate cuts last year helped to raise optimism among Canadians. Half of Canadians are said to be $200 or less away from being unable to cover their monthly bills and debt payments. The firm MNP has released its quarterly consumer debt report, which found fewer Canadians expect their debt situation to improve in the coming year. A growing number even believes that it will worsen. More than half say that they don't think they'll be able to cover all of their living and family expenses over the next year without building up more debt. The president of MNP, Grant Bazian, joined us for more on the report.
We use Ipsos, which is a well-renowned survey pollster, and they essentially just ask debtors how they feel. It's a sentiment survey, and they give them different rankings. Do you feel like you're $1,000 away, or $1,000 more, or 200? And they tabulate all the results, and it shows in this particular quarter that 50% of Canadians feel that they are $200 or less away from paying all their debts. So it's a very structured process. But keep in mind, I don't think the survey respondents are sitting there with a pen and paper doing the math. It's a sentiment survey in terms of how they feel about it. So they're saying that they feel they're about, half of Canadians surveyed feel that they are about $200 away from not paying their debts in full. So that's how we come up with the results. I think we started doing I know we started doing the survey back in 2016. Our benchmark is about 46%. There are times when we've had 56%. There are times when we've had 40%. So I would say right now we're at 50, so we're about 4% higher than the average benchmark since 2016. It goes up and down a little bit like a roller coaster, and this is where we are right now. So higher than the average. We don't ask the questions in terms of the underlying theme, but there's conjecture, right? And I think it's part of it has to do with Canadians having the highest consumer debt per capita of almost any first world country in the world. And they've had that title, for lack of a better word, for a number of years. So I think when someone has that much debt and it's hard to tackle down that principle, maybe they're just making interest payments, interest rates go up a little bit, they feel a bit more stressed. I think that's a big part of it, because interest rates have been going down, but yet people still feel stressed out. And I think it's just because, well, first, there's 2 reasons for that. One would be there's always a bit of a lag when interest rates either go up or down before people are affected by it. And also, I think it's just the large volume of debt that Canadian consumers have. I would say those are the primary reasons. There's probably a lot of other ancillary reasons, but I can't say with certainty.
Heartbroken families, burnt out business owners, and Los Angeles leaders are beginning to ponder a monumental task: rebuilding what was lost in the Southern California wildfires. Even with the flames of two large fires still leaping, government officials are talking about the job of cleaning toxic debris. Then it will be rebuilding homes, restaurants, schools, boutiques, and houses of worship in devastated communities, all while finding the financing for it. The LA County supervisor says homeowners are saying that rebuilding is a question of when, not if. Blue Origin has launched its massive new rocket on its first test flight.
5, 4, 1. Lift off. Chamber pressures are good. Vehicles cleared the tower. Now passing 18 seconds into flight.
The early morning liftoff from Florida carried an experiment meant to orbit thousands of kilometers above Earth. The test satellite successfully reached orbit 13 minutes into the flight. The 98-meter New Glenn rocket is designed to haul spacecraft and eventually astronauts to orbit and also the moon. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website at thenewsforum.ca and make sure to follow us on social media. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the Newsforum YouTube channel. Good night, Canada.